Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, depending upon where you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us today for this important conversation about why culture, why now. A few housekeeping items before we get started. All lines are on mute and will remain on mute for the duration of the session. We have saved time at the end to answer questions. So if you have any questions as we're going along, please submit them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to as many as we can. This session is being recorded, so we will send out a link to the replay as well as any slides that we talk about during the session. So without further ado, let me hand it over to my colleague, Kristen, to get us started.
Okay, Kate, thank you. And hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today on why culture, why now? We are definitely seeing an increasing trend in organizations focusing on their culture now more than ever. And all of you are obviously very interested in the topic as we have over 1,500 people joining us today from all over the world. We have people connecting in from Brazil, from Poland, from France, from the UK, from the US, Canada, Belgium, Netherlands, Switzerland, and more. So welcome. And I'm thrilled that you've joined us today. Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Kristen Leverone, and I lead LHH's leadership development business globally. I've had a long career at LHH and also partnering with organizations to address their talent and leadership challenges. I've also been a part of LHH's own business transformation over the last 20 plus years. And with me today, we have two terrific guests who will share their perspectives and insights with us on the topic of culture. I'm delighted to welcome Gaelle de la Fosse, president of LHH and member of the Adecco Group's executive committee. In just 2 years, Gaelle has transformed LHH from 7 siloed business lines into one comprehensive talent solutions provider, allowing us to combine our resources and serve clients seamlessly across the professional talent lifecycle. With more than 2 decades in senior leadership roles across industries, from global consulting to retail, Gaelle knows well the crucial roles that talent and organizational culture play in driving business success, and she's going to share some of those insights with us today. Next, we have Alex Marins joining us from Brazil. Alex is part of our global leadership development leadership team and is one of our global experts in supporting organizations with their culture initiatives. And he's been doing this also for over 20 plus years. And he brings deep expertise as well as a personal passion for building strategic partnerships. So Alex and Gaelle, welcome.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
before I get started and bring you into the discussion, I did want to level set on just a couple of quick things as it relates to culture. So when we talk about corporate culture, we're referring to the shared values, attitudes, standards, and beliefs that characterize members of an organization and define its nature. We've conducted recent research that I'd like to share with you as well. It's coming from the LHH Workforce Trends Survey on this topic. So our research tells us that company culture matters to organizations and their employees. We asked the question, outside of compensation, what, if anything, makes people want to work at an organization? 49% of employers, 39% of employees told us the answer was good workplace culture. We also asked, what should your company increase its investment in to better attract and retain talent? 36% employers, 29% of employees told us good workplace culture. Our research and our client experience tell us that creating a positive organizational culture is more important than ever. In today's whirlwind of change, from company reorganizations to mergers to leadership transitions, a company's resilience hinges on one crucial element: its culture. A positive culture can be the anchor that keeps your team grounded and empowered, particularly during periods of transition. So, with that as a backdrop, let's bring our guests into the conversation. So, Gaelle, I'd love to start with you. So, given your role as the global CEO of LHH, a part of the Adecco Group, why is culture so critical for businesses today, now more than ever?
Thanks, Kristen. Hello, everybody. You know, I feel very strongly about this topic, and creating positive workplace cultures is really actually more important than ever. This is a topic that didn't used to come up that much in the conversations I've had with, I have with CEOs and CHROs all the time. But these days, it seems that in a way or another, this topic around the culture of the workplace is really coming to the forefront. And I think there are many reasons for this. First of all, the need for agility and constant change. In a world where AI, the overall pace of innovation is accelerating at such speeds, and where there's simultaneously increasing uncertainty in the economic and geopolitical environment, that creates a lot of disruption. The second thing is that we see in companies is the new expectations of the younger workforce around flexibility, work-life balance, but also purpose, social, economic impact. Hybrid work, where connection and alignment between individuals, teams is actually challenged these days, and companies need to find kind of a new glue that is not the office space. And then lastly, talent shortages, I think make companies see now that the most high demand skills are really difficult to find. And companies are competing for those high demand skills. And so they need to attract and retain the talent they need to succeed. And what we see when we do our research and when we talk to leaders is that this is creating a lot of stress on the organizations themselves and on leaders in particular, because those are the ones that are in the middle of these transformations, and the levels of burnout in senior managers and leaders has actually never been higher. And it's also a topic that is now widely recognized. So I think the need for stronger, more positive, more engaging work cultures is really critical. And I also want to stress the role of the leaders here, because it's I think you said it earlier, it's the management, the business practices, the behaviors, all of that is really lived by each colleague each day that actually creates the culture. It's not some PowerPoint on a wall or on a deck that really does that. Leadership plays a central role to define what the culture is, and to enforce the culture, to role model the culture. And only the leaders can really change the culture when it's necessary. So I think that's a really strong link between the culture and the leaders. And I think most companies actually now recognize that there is a strong business case for prioritizing cultural transformation. It's not just a nice to have. And the research that we have really shows that positive cultures do have a material impact on business outcomes and performance, whether it be on innovation and creativity, on employee productivity, employee collaboration, well-being, and overall financial and strategic performance. So really, I think culture has become critical because it's so much linked to business success these days. And it's become a key competitive advantage, and it's recognized as such now.
Yeah, that is, really helpful, Gaelle. I mean, a couple of things I'll just kind of pull out that you just shared. That I think the language around it's the new glue. I love that. I think that's something people can relate to. And I also think, as employees work inside of an organization, all of us can reflect back on a previous role or organization or a team where it's been a really positive culture, or maybe it hasn't been a positive culture. Like we've all lived that. We know what that looks like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. And that it's not a nice to have anymore, as a business. It's really an imperative. So you sort of talked about from a business perspective, but could you also maybe take it a little further and, comment on how you see the cultural imperative really connecting to our HR strategies and practices as well?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's very linked because it's the common thread that links together all HR practices, actually. And I think that's also why it's becoming more and more important. I think, from who you recruit to how you train and develop people, the managers you decide to promote, all the way to the benefits that you provide, all of those elements are actually, in a way, an expression of the culture and a reinforcement of the culture or not. And so I think that's really why it's central to HR strategies. And all these things need to feel coherent for the culture to have the impact that is needed on, again, attracting and retaining the right talent, but also in making employees feeling as engaged, as effective, as possible. And I think there are different dimensions that to think about for HR professionals. And you mentioned our global workforce for the future report, and I think it's interesting to see that when people are asked what type of environment enables them to be at their best, so I guess a positive workplace culture, people say that they want flexibility in how they organize their work and a healthy work-life balance. They say they want to be trusted to make decisions and have autonomy. They want to be able to apply their skills and expertise to make a meaningful impact. They want to have a positive and inclusive work environment that promotes collaboration and teamwork. And the last thing they mentioned is, and I think it's very important, it's they want to feel supported by their colleagues and their managers. And I think working on those in isolation is actually quite difficult. And so I think that's why the culture has to be present in all of these things. And what I find actually interesting is in these studies, more than 40% of workers globally say that their mental health has suffered because of a toxic or a damaging work culture. So, and that leads obviously to disengagement, lack of innovation, ultimately resignation of maybe people that, those companies would have liked to keep. And I think, 40% is a really high number. And so I think that also shows kind of on the negative side how critical it is for companies to address the culture transformation. I think that number of people who have suffered from inappropriate work cultures is really a call to action, I think, for all companies.
Yeah, I agree. And you referenced the new research, and so some people will be asking about when they can get that. So we'll be sure to share the publication as it's finalized. But we were able to get our hands on some of the early findings to be able to share it with you today. Gaelle talked about the importance of culture for the business and the impact that it can make on performance. Where HR can come in and those strategies and practices. You also touched on a little bit, the important role that the leader plays in really ensuring, that there really can be a critical linchpin in creating a positive culture. Is there, any other comments you have that you want to share about the role of the leader in this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as I said, I think the role of the leader is really central to the culture that a company has. And you know, for leaders to be accountable and to be the role models of the culture that companies want, they must be a crucial part in how that culture is developed and implemented, especially when there's culture transformation. And this can't only be the job of the HR teams. And we still a lot of, you know, in spite of the fact that culture is recognized as something that is key, it's still oftentimes seen as, you know, only the job of the CHRO, or the HR team in general. And you know, our experience shows that it must start from the top, from the C-suite, from the CEO themselves, because or else there is no way to really create that drive that cultural transformation needs. Obviously, you know, the CHROs, the HR team are a crucial strategic partner in driving and implementing any culture change, but I think the full leadership team across every single department and function needs to be accountable and involved to enable meaningful transformation. And I think at many levels of the organization, it's not only the top leadership, but it's also the middle management that needs to get engaged. And I think the other thing that I think is interesting is that, you know, sometimes companies that we see engage in culture transformation, but the leaders don't necessarily receive the right skills training. And what I mean by that is that they actually need to know how to, you know, exhibit the behaviors that are aligned with the organization, the culture that the organization wants to have. And it's really important that the leaders, as I said before, really exhibit that culture, because that's the only way that people will actually believe it's the culture. And so how to manage in a way that reflects the culture, I think is a skill that sometimes needs to be learned. And I think the leadership development programs can really help the leaders embody the company values as they manage, you know, the change. And it's not easy. I mean, usually culture changes happen at the same time as business changes. So there's, again, a lot of stress on the organizations, but I think the leaders need to be equipped with the right tools to actually make that successful.
Yeah,
A key
great
role,
comments.
clearly
Yeah,
a key role.
definitely. You know, we know obviously, you know, as a, I can speak for myself even, right? As a business leader today, there's a lot coming at us that we need to manage. So there are lots of challenges. You know, you talked about, you know, how we can better equip the leaders. So with that, Alex, I'd love to bring you into the conversation here. You know, so given your experience in working with your clients in this space, you know, what have you seen in terms of, you know, are leaders today ready and capable for their role in really creating a positive culture? And if not, how have you seen your clients address this?
Okay, thanks, Kristen, for the question. And I'd like to start saying hello to our audience today. It's a pleasure participating in this conversation about such an important topic. Regarding your question, I don't think our leaders are ready for this. Gaelle just brought lots of reasons why leaders are so relevant. But I think today, the new hybrid world of work turned leaders more distant from their people and their teams on the day-to-day. And in addition to that, I think that you also mentioned that their agendas, our agendas as leaders, are very pressured for many complex and dynamic business challenges every day. So in order to really create a positive impact on culture, leaders need to pay attention on their priorities. They need to realize that they play such this critical role we mentioned in the process. And as we know, a company culture is shaped by their attitudes, our attitudes. They are the ones who really set the example, and they need to be close to their teams. They need to create a safe and engaging environment. And when we mention safe, is the psychological safety that really enables teams to flourish, to speak up, and to bring their best. In summary, I would say that there is a call for a more conscious and humanized leadership approach nowadays. Doesn't mean that we are not humans, but we need to play more this part of our heart on our day-to-day, right? And back into your question in terms of the clients, and this factor of the leaders become even more relevant when companies are going through some sort of change. I'd like to point us to a slide where we list common scenarios where we have been assisting clients to take care of their culture and their people. Yeah. And to make it more complex, in many cases, those scenarios can also happen in combination one to another. It doesn't happen in isolated ways. So, for example, I would bring up here two examples. First one is, for example, one large consumer goods industry that was experiencing monetary loss, losing market, mainly because of the lack of innovation. And at the same time, as consequence, they were start losing talents as well, with a high turnover. So due to the company, decided to bring a new CEO on board. So we had new leadership in place. And upon his arrival, he urgently contracted us to diagnose the culture, the results were appointing a very high level of entropy. And we craft a revised cultural framework, including their expected behaviors and the new leadership competence that would support their business transformation. So this was really fundamental. We worked together during 2 years, intense work. At the end, we were able to reassess the scenario. The teams were very engaged and energized. We became with a very positive cultural photo, very reduced entropy. Innovation became a reality, part of their ways of working, and they launched a new set of products that end up becoming them very, very successful in the market. So the turnaround took place and they were really pleased at the end. This is scenario one, I would say, an example. And you can see that there were lots of things taking place at the same time. In a second good example, I would say a financial institution that came to us, they were being privatized and merged with an international company. So a new company was being born. During this transformation, they realized that the cultural framework would be essential in support of their new positioning and also their new business strategy. Consequently, they also be the new identity and the glue you mentioned, Gaelle mentioned as well, to be the glue for the new mix of people they had, because they ended up being a mix of former employees and many newcomers they brought from the market. So we jointly crafted this cultural identity for this newborn company. We used the results to build their leadership competences. And now, exactly now, we are activating those leaders through an extensive and complete development journey. So our experience says that a cultural transformation journey demands multiple interventions and takes time to become really internalized. And again, I think it's important for us to reinforce and highlight again that leaders are always at the center of each and any cultural transformation strategy.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. And those are two great examples to help kind of bring this to life for people here. I'm wondering, in the first example that you gave around the consumer goods organization, you talked about entropy. Could you maybe share a little bit more about what we mean by that?
Yeah, sure. Entropy means when we are diagnosing or mapping a cultural photo from one company, we have the values and behaviors that we try to look for. And at the end, we realize that we may have positive values that are happening and being experienced every day. But remember when you mentioned the toxic culture? So entropy are the ones when we see some limiting values or attitudes that play the toxic role in terms of, for example, you can see some examples like silos, excess control and management, lack of collaboration, excess of centralization, and so on. So any sort of behavior or attitude that somehow connects to and plays the role against the positive culture, I'd say.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, now you're
So I'm going to stay with you, Alex. We have a number of HR professionals on our call today. So if you were talking to one of your HR partners and they had a cultural imperative how would you recommend they get started in addressing this? I think for some people, it can just feel overwhelming, and it may feel like they really can't move the needle on the culture.
Exactly. Good question, Kristen. And we also, when we were start to structuring our practice, we had to craft a guideline for us, and that's the guideline we are bringing up to our clients as well. And we are naming this as the DNA approach. And then I'd like to bring up our DNA slide that will help you understand what I'm going to explain to you guys. So we always recommend clients to start with a diagnosis for multiple reasons, even when you think you already know the needs to change, and I will explain why. The first reason is because by doing that, you are offering an opportunity to engage your employees and your people, to give them a voice in shaping the culture. They're going to have a way that they could say what is good, what's not good, and what they would like to for the future. So another good reason is that the experienced culture they live can have multiple nuances and relevance differences among subgroups. We can have subcultures, as we say. For example, one business area can differ from another business area, or even in the hierarchical levels. Sometimes people on the top may experience different from leaders that are in between, and also different from employees that are on the bottom of the organization as well. So better mapping will help you, the company develop a more effective transformation roadmap to design the front two and address all the specifics we may have. And a very important collateral benefit, I'd say, is you're going to have an initial photo, a baseline that you could be able to measure and compare against after all the actions and initiatives to see how much you progressed against it. That's what we did with, for example, with the consumer goods industry. They were able to compare those. Yeah. But what I'd like to here also to pause and mention something very important for us, and we are very excited as well. That's something that we decided to help us excel in diagnosis. So we have established a global partnership with the Barrett Value Center, a well-known global institution with more than 25 years of experience in cultural and values assessment. So now we are working together. Beyond assessments, they provide us also an evolutionary model and powerful tools and analytics to help us exactly take the photo and help us design the evolutionary journey to take the company to the next level in terms of their culture. So I'm very pleased about that. This is going to be subject of our next webinar. I know you're going to mention that later today. But back to the model, to the DNA model. In our second phase, it's also key that we moved into the N, the navigate phase, where through your results, we're going to drive and promote internal alignment with your leaders around the business strategy and what's going to be the espoused values and behaviors for the future. This can sound simple, but it demands many rounds of good dialogue, discussions, refinement, and even validation to really end up with a very, I would say, quality result of your identity for the future. Once your cultural framework is ready, it's time to advance, and then we go into the A phase, where we assist companies to build a complete roadmap of initiatives that will be necessary to turn the desired culture a reality. Experience says that a successful cultural transformation requires what we say entire system change approach. It means that the entire system will only change when two things happen: when individuals internalize and start demonstrating the new behaviors, but also when the company needs also to incorporate those desired cultural aspects into their processes, systems, rewards, governance model, and communication. So I would say that that's are two factors that usually we consider when designing the roadmap. At the end, it's nothing like an action plan that takes place in 3 months. Usually it's a 1 year, 2 years journey where we're going to be supporting you, or many activities also can take place inside the company. They don't need to depend upon us, but we bring the expertise for that. And I would like to close saying that for me, it's fundamental that during this entire process that you incorporate a measurement mechanism. You need to track progress. You need to generate insights during the journey that will help any company calibrate this roadmap during the process itself. And usually we also bring up as part of our expertise to the process as well.
That's excellent, Alex. And I love how you, when you talk about the diagnose phase, you're really saying, let's take a photo, right? Let's get a picture, a visual map of where we are as an organization, to then align that to, as Gaelle mentioned, many organizations have new leadership changes, new business strategies, and addressing culture changes all at the same time. So having that picture of where we are today to really align it to the business strategy going forward, and then to be able to really measure and map the progress against that. I think it's really proven to be a really effective approach. And at the same time, as I'm listening to you, I'm sure there are some people here saying, I don't know if I can get my entire organization to take on something like this right now. So there are smaller things that each of us can do every day in our roles to impact, the small teams that we're on, or the big teams that we're in, or part of the business unit that we're in. We each as leaders can make a positive impact in smaller ways too. So we'll get to some of that in a minute. But, Alex, I'm going to stay to you, and then Gaelle, I'm going to bring you back into this, mainly because one of the things we wanted to share was actually the work that we've done here at LHH around our culture. And so, Alex, one of your clients was actually LHH, and you served as the lead consultant supporting Gaelle and others as LHH really took a step back to say, how do we align and create our culture imperatives as we move forward with our new business strategy. As a business leader, I participated in that process as well. And so you've talked about the DNA approach. And, if you kind of think about your experience with LHH and the DNA approach, was there something that was particularly insightful or surprising that came from your consulting work that you think would be helpful to share that others can learn from?
Yeah. Yeah, I had the privilege of being the technical leader of our internal project. And in fact, it was the first time we really applied it globally. I think in the past we did some cuts specific of the globe, but never done as we did when Gaia arrived for the entire company globally. And it was very unique for me, like a unique experience. I would like to highlight some outcomes for me, my key outcomes of this experience. I would say that number one, when we started the project, we are present in more than 60 countries. So I'm wondering, do we really have a common DNA? So because we have distinguished local countries specifics, but at the end, we identify that we do have a strong and common cultural DNA. So we have traits that came up and we acknowledge, everybody were able to acknowledge that. And at the end, we decided that we needed to honor and leverage from that. So our work from taking this as a benefit, because this is what makes us unique and also engage our internal people, right? So, and another thing is we also realized that at the same time, we were experiencing common issues in terms of the entropy I mentioned. So what were the characteristics that we needed to pay attention and address? So we took those as well as part of the reflection and the conversation internally. And we end up with new global cultural commitments that are now being internalized and through a series of initiatives that are being driven by our HR globally, and also by the cultural champions and leaders in each of these countries. Because as we mentioned, the culture will never happen by HR only. So we need the entire community on board and working on that. So for me, I think these were the ones that really stood up for me.
Yeah, and Alex, thank you for all of your work with that. And obviously, Gaelle, given the work with the LHH culture that you've sponsored, in your role as CEO, can you share with us why that was such an important priority for you?
Yes, absolutely. And just to give you a little bit of business context on why this culture transformation was so important. You mentioned it earlier, LHH went through a massive transformation over the past 2 years. As I said before, the world of work has changed tremendously and has become increasingly complex. And so our analysis of the situation was that companies needed to tackle a rising number of talent issues, and that they could no longer approach them in isolation. We saw in the example of culture how it's so linked to recruitment, retention, leadership, and that the talent life cycle really needs to be approached holistically to have the desired impact. So that was kind of the premise of why we integrated all these leading brands in recruitment, upskilling, reskilling, leadership development, outplacement, all under the LHH brand. And so that's what we've been doing over the past 2 years. But what this has meant is really creating a new group of 10,000 colleagues, experts in their own fields, but coming from a very different background, ways of working. And so I really felt that having a new strategy would not be enough to succeed, and that we really needed to create that glue that we were talking about, the common behaviors, the recognized values that would really link us together in this common objective and strategy for LHH. So as Alex mentioned, we use the Barrett values methodology. All our LHH colleagues were surveyed, and they had an opportunity to help us identify what the culture was at that point and what the desired culture was. And so we were able to create sort of a gap analysis of where we stood and where we wanted to be. And so that's how we basically narrowed down the different building blocks of our new culture, always linked to our business objectives. And as Alex said, we call them culture commitments. And these culture commitments, why did we call them that? It's because we feel that it's the commitments that we make to one another in the organization, to actually make this the daily work experience for all of our colleagues to feel inspired, challenged, accepted, and really fully engaged with each other and their work. So it was a critical, and it is a critical part of the success that we've had. And it's really beneficial in terms of, we've seen improvement in terms of collaboration, productivity, positive employee engagement scores, employee retention. So now it is actually part of what we call the new LHH.
Exactly.
Yeah, and obviously, Gaelle, I've been a part of that journey because I was with LHH before you joined. And then to see the transformation that we've gone through as a business, but also I can just speak for myself. When you made that a real priority for the organization, to me, it sent a really clear message about how important our people are in order to help us really move forward as a combined business. So thank you for sponsoring that too. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you to both our guests. We're not finished because we do have a number of questions coming through in the Q&A. So I'm going to kind of toggle between the Q&A questions here, and I'll be feeding our guests some of these questions as well. So let me start with the first question here. Gaelle, I'm going to send it over to you. It's really around how to get support and buy-in with their CEO. So how can I approach this conversation about culture with my CEO, given you're a CEO?
I think it's the link with the business strategy. That's the place where I started to think about culture and what would make the business strategy successful. And so I think when talking to CEOs about culture, it's really, Alex talked about different moments in organizations where, the culture discussion might be even more relevant, whether it's big transformations, integrations, leadership changes. And so it's really identifying what could be the triggers that would interest the CEO in terms of making sure that their business strategy is successful, and identifying perhaps also We talked about the 40% of people who feel that they have experienced a tough workplace culture, and I also think those statistics and that kind of diagnosis is really important for companies to have and to monitor. That's also I think it should be a big trigger of cultural transformation requirement.
Yeah, so definitely link it to business strategy.
Yes.
Right. Yep. Good. Thanks, Gaelle. Alex, I'm going to throw one your way. So from your experience, what would you say are the critical success factors that we should consider and plan for, when launching this type of initiative?
Yeah. There are a few ones that I'd like to highlight here today. I think first one, Gael just mentioned, we definitely need executive sponsorship. Many times HR comes to us and say, I'd like to address the HR topic. And the question is, how can we do it? And Gael just responded, but I think we need to open the executive conversation and bring them knowledgeable more about the culture and the implication of the culture in their results. C-level usually is more factual and likes data. So you can bring up data that make them turn a subject topic in a more realistic topic and explaining the business impacts and results. So that's number one. I'd say number two, it's the relationship with the business strategy, because you need a compelling storytelling. Because the company needs to understand why you want to change or you want to evolve your culture. Why that? So here, Gael said in LHH, we were driving our new positioning and one LHH, etc. So it was clear to everybody where we want to go and what we want to achieve. So that's the same for other clients. They need to tie one to another and bring up this very compelling storytelling in terms of engaging, because then brings the third topic, I would say, is engagement. And to really engage everybody, you need to communicate, and communicate. Communicate during the entire journey, since the beginning, with the why we want to change and why we are evolving the culture and where we are during the process, what is going to happen, how this is going to affect me and my team and my area, and where we are performing against the culture, measuring and bringing positive feedback and calibrating results. So that's communications, another key. And I would say that we're going to be kind of repeating a little bit, but I think the last one is leadership engagement as well, because we need leaders walking the talk. That's why we as a company, we are bringing up the culture so strongly in our portfolio, because we do leadership development and there is no cultural change without leadership development. So you need to take into consideration cultural aspects in your leadership development initiatives and inside the company. Yeah. And I would say that another final one is if we want to really have full engagement, another good strategy is embracing champions and nominating and embracing champions around your company as well. Here in LHH, for example, we have champions in all of the 60 or 70 countries we are. So we are working as a team, as a global network, activating the cultural, sharing ideas, examples, practices, initiatives that took success. So this helps lots in company, because they also are a kind of be able to hear and bring up concerns or ideas that we could leverage and that help elevate the culture globally. Yeah. And the same in any company. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that role of the culture champion, I know several of them personally within LHH, and I think that's been such a really important role, because they can be this connection between kind of maybe what we think we're communicating and sharing with the organization around culture as a more of a senior business leader. But then we get the real feedback from people on the ground in the business, and they can really help make that connection to keep us on track in terms of our commitments.
Exactly.
That was an effective role. Thank you, Alex. We've got a few more questions here. So I think, Alex, this one's also going to come to you, but obviously, Gaelle, feel free if you want to jump in. It's around, the question is, did moving to remote hybrid work change the dynamics of culture? And Alex, in one of your comments, you made the comment around that there's increased distance between managers and their teams and their employees, for those of us that are working more remotely or in a hybrid setting. So would you like to comment a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I think the hybrid model ended up making us rethink the way we work with our teams. So we have also internal surveys that tell us what makes a team effective. And we say there's no good news and no big news here, but we say that is the psychological safe environment and the trust is the basis for always the basis. And how you build trust? You build trust by connection, by working together, being close, getting to know, working together. And if you are in a hybrid way, I think leaders and companies need to take into consideration their governance model. So we need to think and plan in our agendas moments to get together. Even we know that we are separated apart, but how we get together virtually, face to face, how we see so many clients of us that are driving initiatives inside the office to bring people into the office, but not in a kind of reinforcement mode, but much more in a way that we can promote integration, synergies, energy, positive energy among the people. So really changes because in the past it was taking place as regular day to day. So we don't need to do anything exceptional. But nowadays we really need to take into consideration and plan for that. Otherwise, you will experience some impact in your culture, I would say.
Yeah.
And maybe
Yeah, and I think,
if I can add to that, I think hybrid is also, the way that companies do hybrid, and there are so many ways that, companies can do hybrid. It's also an expression of the culture. How flexible it is, where are people supposed to go when they are in person, because it's not necessarily only in the office. All those things I think are an expression of the culture, and that's why it has to be thought through. And it can't just be left to, organizing teams when we would have done meetings in person. It has to be a little bit more holistic in the way that companies address the hybrid, their hybrid strategies linked to their
yeah,
culture.
And the
yeah, I
leaders'
totally.
attitudes, and the leaders' attitudes, right? Again.
Well, and I think for many organizations, maybe pre-COVID, cultures were developing more organically. Perhaps Alex, that's maybe where you were commenting, and I think now it really requires intentionality around if we are working in a different way, how can we be more intentional around creating that positive culture? And I absolutely, the role of the leader really matters. So we've got a few more questions here. Let's see where we should go. Actually, this is a good one. I actually think you both should answer this one if you're comfortable. Who defines the culture and values for an organization? So Alex, we'll go to you and then we'll let Gaelle comment.
Okay. Yeah. I would say that the diagnosis mechanism, the survey helps bring up the voice for everyone. For example, in LHH, we invited 5,000 people around the globe to participate, and their voices were represented in there. But at the end, the ones who are really driving the future of the company, taking decisions of the strategy, need to discuss. And here, what I usually suggest to my clients is not just as a few small group of people do it, but extended senior leadership team work on that. So because then you can have broader perspectives and implications of the culture. They can play the role being I'd say, the representatives of their teams and their areas as well. So, and we did that Gaelle can comment how we did it internally as well. But I think at the end, because it's very difficult to have everybody as part of the decision making, but we definitely need representatives that could bring up the voice. And that's why we also sometimes suggest the refinements, because then we come back to HR, we test, we probe, and then we see what we can fine tuning in terms of the final commitments or behaviors, etc.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I mean, I fully agree. And that's exactly how we did it at LHH. Yes, we took the input of all of our colleagues because it's important to get the pulse of what is the culture that people live at that moment and the culture that is desired. But in the end, we worked with various teams and groups, and we did a lot of focus groups and interviews with leaders to come up with our culture commitments. I think the other reason why it's important that it's the leaders ultimately are the ones that are going to be accountable again for making sure that that new culture, the behaviors, the values are fully embedded in the organization. And so that's why they need to be involved from day one. And I think there's another topic that we didn't address is how we formulate the culture and what are the words that are used, because it's important. Every single word counts in how we formulate the culture. And I know that, for instance, we took a lot of time in a wider leadership team, but ultimately it was the top leaders that kind of decided, okay, well, this is how we want to express how we want people to live the LHH culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know when we rolled out those new cultural imperatives, because speaking from my vantage point, they really resonated, and you could see the work that went into really choosing the right words that would really resonate with the organization. So lots of work happening there. And then Gaelle, just sort of, as I'm listening to you today talk about this, I mean, obviously one of the reasons we wanted to bring you into this discussion is because you're bringing multiple lenses into this conversation, and so many people have worked in professional services firms. We provide lots of support and services to other organizations, but we don't always bring that work to ourselves. And so there's been some great learnings for us by being able to work through this internally. And your perspective as a CEO, but also someone who really sponsored this type of work, I'm sure people are finding very interesting today. So we're going to do one last question, and then we'll wrap up. So this one it's a little bit longer than the other, so let me read it to you. We have been through culture transformation for a few years, but one area where we have struggled is to sustain the new behaviors and the new ways of working while being in the midst of transformation and constant leadership changes. What advice do you have for us?
Yeah,
You want to take it, Alex? Okay, go ahead.
I can start. That's challenging. We know that. That's why crafting the roadmap and getting pulses along the process and calibrating based on feedback is fundamental. So again, based on our model, we took benefit from a tool that we already use for pulse check in terms of climate and the environment. And we incorporate cultural thermometers, I would say, that helps us as well. And then also take the actions for that. The problem is when you start rotating people again. So you need to rethink your onboarding process as well, because since the recruitment process, okay, people is leaving, but you are bringing new people. Consequently, you are bringing new people. If you are bringing new people, you need to take into consideration the cultural fit. And you need to if you have the opportunity to bring someone new, that needs to be a role model for your culture as well. And again, during everybody that is being on board, is how we really make everybody understands the storytelling, understands our DNA, understands what's expected for the person, not only in terms of the results, but at the ways of working as well. And the continuous reinforcement, I think, don't give up, I would say. Keep calibrating your plan, thinking what are the initiatives, because it's a long journey. It's not like a 1 year journey. It's like 3-5 years journey sometimes. And you need to keep going, and keep calibrating, keep hearing the people, bringing everybody's feedback to your agenda in terms of the initiatives as well. Because at the end, when we talk about cultural, you need to continually manage it forever. It's nothing that you do once each 5 years. But if you don't manage your culture as part of your KPIs and your scorecard, you lose track of it, right? Right, Gaelle?
Yeah, and I think that's why you mentioned it before, but I think that's why it was so important for us to have these sponsors locally, to really make sure that we had initiatives that were running. We had, you know, our projects that were linked to the culture commitments, because I think that's the reinforcement mechanism that exists. And, you know, we talked about the leaders. Yes, the leaders are key in shaping and, you know, exhibiting the culture that that they want, but then it has to snowball. If it doesn't snowball in the organization, then it'll just stay at the top, and that can never be successful. So it's really important that there is a mechanism to make it permeate within the, you know, the all of the levels of the organization, and that's permanently. I agree. Permanently, that has to happen.
Okay, well, thank you. We've had, I know there were a few more questions we didn't get to, but we are getting close to the end here. So I first want to say thank you to Gaelle and thank you to Alex for joining us and for sharing your perspective and your insights.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
Sure.
You know, a few things that stood out to me in terms of little snippets that obviously stay really focused on aligning it to the business strategy in order to get the senior executive support and sponsorship. That HR can certainly help drive it and facilitate it, but it's not theirs to own. It needs to live and permeate throughout the entire organization. And those of us as leaders need to really play our part. We play a critical role in ensuring that those cultural imperatives and values really get lived, and that our teams and employees experience that, and that it's something that you know, needs to be lived every day. And it's not a one-time event. It's not a project. It's an ongoing journey.
Exactly.
So with that, we're going to wrap up and say thank you. And I just want to let everyone know what's coming next. So today was one of a 3-part series, all around the topic of organizational culture. So we have 2 more sessions coming up that you'll receive an invitation to. In May, we've got part 2, which is called Taking Stock of Your Company Culture. And then in June, part 3, which is Driving Cultural Change. So we hope that you join us, and we also look forward to your feedback after this session when you get the quick questionnaire. So with that, just want to wish everyone a wonderful day, and thanks for joining us. Bye all.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.